But Matt hasn't watched it yet, so he's going to have to do a little bit of catching up. And then you'll understand the donkey reference. Yes. Okay, so here's tonight's confession, which comes from Anonymous, from somewhere in the west coast of Scotland, in a very important job, doing very important things. That's how it's been signed. Okay. Simon, for years I have kept this secret for fear of ruining my professional reputation that I've worked so hard to build in my local community. Many see me as an honest, hard-working woman. Oh, can I just say before we go any further, if you're having your tea, there is a little element of maybe you might just want to pause. Just as a little kind of public safety announcement. Okay. Yeah. Honest, hard-working woman in a public sector role, a public figure who champions integrity and exemplifies professionalism. Like the sound of this person. However, I harbour a stomach-churning dark secret that if it ever becomes public, I will be run out of town like a renegade in a cowboy film. I have many weaknesses, I suppose we all do, but my weakness is a stomach that doesn't cope very well with a combination of tapas, followed by sangria, lager, wine, and shots of something or other. Many other Scottish women see this as a standard night out, but I, on the other hand, prefer a nice cup of tea and an episode of Mastermind. Anyway, says Anonymous, a few years ago, I had tickets to a gig in Glasgow to see Dennis LeCourrier of Doctor Hook fame at the well-known venue Oran Moor in Glasgow's West End. I met my friends in a lovely Spanish tapas restaurant in the famous Ashton Lane, where we enjoyed lots of Rioja, sangria, Corona lager, and some food. I know you know where this is heading. After copious amounts of alcohol and the odd little plate of patatas bravas, we all headed off on the short walk, where on arrival we had some more wine, beer and shots. We had a great night and left in a very merry state with Sylvia's mother ringing in our ears. A quick subway trip, another walk to Glasgow Central, and a sprint in a pair of heels meant that we caught the infamous last train from Glasgow Central. So infamous, Billy Connolly wrote a song about it. The train was rammed. It was stinking of a combination of chips and cheese, chips and gravy, chips and curry sauce, and fish and chips, stale booze and more chips. I managed to get a seat in a set of 4. I was opposite my friend, beside a couple who occupied the window seats. This couple were facing each other with a small table between them, upon which were 2 polystyrene tubs of chips, soaked in vinegar. As the rickety train moved from side to side and swayed backwards and forwards, I shut my eyes, and just for a moment as I was exhausted from all the pogo dancing to Doctor Hook classics. Just as a point of reference at this point, I don't think you pogo to Doctor Hook, do you?
No, not really. No.
Your Honour. Anyway, I tried to focus on the other passengers singing songs, but could only open my mouth a fraction to try and join in the Scottish chants of I Would Walk 500 Miles. I glanced at the couple next to me and noticed they'd fallen asleep, or more likely in a food coma, given all the chips they'd stuffed into their faces. My stop was almost at the end of the line, so the train wasn't as busy. However, a group of brain donors remained on the train, behaving like Neanderthals, shouting profanities at anyone who dared make eye contact. I, being a woman of class, was rather disgusted with their antics. My stop neared and I got up to alight from the train, remembering to take my belongings, as the helpful lady announced that my train was about to stop. I tottered towards the door in my heels, holding my carrier bag. At this point, one of the Neanderthals stood in my path. Now, I'm going to do this as a Cockney accent, even though clearly this wasn't going to be...
come on. Oh, no.
One of the Neanderthals stood in my path and said, all right, doll, kiss a kiss and I'll let you pass me. Followed by, how about a wee dance then, eh? And then, what's the password, eh? As he playfully jumped from side to side. I knew he was only having fun, so decided a kick in the Davina McCalls would have been a little harsh. So I said, I am not going to kiss you, I do not want to dance with you, and the password is kebab and chips. At which point I lifted the carrier bag to his eyeline and said, you want this? It's still warm. He put his hand to the bottom of the bag. His eyes lit up and said, seriously? I said, of course, you deserve it. He took the bag from me, planted a kiss on my cheek and told me that I was a top bird. He turned to his friends whilst holding the bag aloft and said, lads, kebab and chips, wahey! At this, obviously we've skipped a bit. At this point the train was stopping and I was at the door desperately waiting for the doors to open. As I jumped off, I watched 5 guys flock around this apparent takeaway like pigeons around a slice of bread in George Square. I gave them a wave as they blew me kisses. I quickly scurried away. As you may have realised, My carrier bag did not contain kebab and chips or anything that recognised food for that matter, but it had proved very helpful to me about 10 minutes earlier. Simon, I seek forgiveness for my sick joke, which has probably left these young men scarred for life. I'm sorry for the stench that hit them square in the face. Da-da-da, missed that one. Don't read that bit. I feel guilty that I got up the next day feeling magic, having ridden myself. Oh, I'm not going to read that bit. Anyway, never again will I drink sangria before a gig. Ever, ever, ever. Please, Father Simon, will you forgive me? Anonymous, somewhere on the west coast of Scotland, in a very important job, doing very important things. Sister Susie, I think we cleaned that up nicely, didn't we? I think we got there.
I think we got there. Yeah, it was good in the end. Well, we've all been there. I think not eating enough dinner, got a bit too excited, had a bit too much fun, went a bit too far. I'm just glad that she wasn't poorly in the establishment that she was drinking or dancing in, because I've been there on the other side of the door.
Yes,
and it's not pretty and it's not nice.
No, okay.
So forgive I've had to clean it up. But yeah, I also would be disgusted by the gentleman's antics, so I feel like they deserved it.
Okay.
I probably would have given him a kick in the Davina McCalls.
You should see, Brother Matthew, you should see what we took out of this particular tale. But what do you say?
I can only imagine. I'm obviously going to forgive, because absolutely he deserved whatever was coming his way. And a great appearance there from Patatas Bravas and Sangria. Well done. Patatas Bravas. So I'm obviously going to forgive, if only because it's a first example of Simon editing on the fly.
Yes.
I haven't quite read all of it, but I'm just going to edit on the fly. So,
no, I thought it was okay, and then I realised that it probably wasn't going to be okay because it's tea time and everything.
Yeah.
Right, okay, it's the people's verdict, please. Do you forgive our anonymous confessee today? It's 61054. First word of the text has to be Simon. Merely moments ago, we were admiring the handiwork of Anonymous from the west coast of Scotland, who, after drinking considerable amounts of sangria, lager, wine and shots, then pogoed at a Dr. Hook concert, had an interesting train journey, the last train from Glasgow Central, and then offered a threatening young man a bag which he thought was some kebab and chips, but it wasn't. Well, it might have been originally. Anyway, the people's verdict is in. What do they say, Brother Matthew?
And everyone is forgiving. Jill says, having had a very similar experience with tequila slammers and a tube train, I can only feel deeply for her anguish. Ian from Houston in Renfrewshire says, totally forgiven. I've been on the late trains from Glasgow many times. They can be awful. Andy from Paisley, how funny can these get? Definitely forgive. Think me and my missus were at the gig. She's a star. Brilliant. Great work from her. Pete from Gorson says, I forgive, as personally, I'd have put my knee into his, whatever, and emptied the bag on his head. And Nick, and it's worth saying, several others are saying forgiven, but can you post the full version somewhere?
Probably not, is the answer. No. Thank you. Confessions at greatesthitsradio.co.uk. If you have a confession and you'd like to win a smart speaker. Donna Holmes says, best confession ever. Our kids have just announced they're never going to drink alcohol. So job done, really. Well, it's 13 minutes to 6 o'clock, confession time. We'll just check in, first of all, I think, with Brother Matthew in the Magic Attic.
Standing by.
Okay, Sister Susie in the Magic Pub somewhere in the ether.
Yes, I'm here.
There, okay, and the wee donkey is there ready as well. So tonight's confession, by the way, if you get a confession read out, you get the smart speaker. Confessions at greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Today's confession comes from Mrs. Hughes, and it's called Tog Value 100 and Rising. Thank you, Mrs. Hughes, who says, Dear Simon, I would like to make a confession and ask for the forgiveness from you and all your listeners. It was quite a long time ago now, when I was much younger and had fewer scruples. I had just finished university and had moved location to be closer to my family, as things hadn't quite worked out, and I found myself, like many others at the time, unemployed. In order to make a bit of money, I accepted the offer of a cleaning job. The previous cleaner had left just a couple of months before, and this left an opening for moi, says Mrs. Hughes. Quite why she reverts to the French there, not quite sure.
No idea.
Slightly pretentious. Anyway, the advert had stated, cleaner required for immediate start 3 days a week. Well, perfect. And I applied and was successful in getting the job, much to the mirth of my family, who recognised that cleaning was not exactly my forte and that I should stick to something I was good at. But at the time, what exactly that was a little unclear. We've all been there. Anyway, I started working for the gentleman and all was well for the first few weeks. I cleaned the house and the laundry was taken care of by Babs, who also thankfully did the ironing, and to a very high spec as well. However, Babs' ironing skills were in demand, and one day she left, leaving me to pick up the ironing duties in the interim until the gentleman could find someone else. I wasn't aware that Babs had left until I arrived at the house one day and was told by the gentleman that I would have to do the ironing until he was able to find someone to replace her. Well, very reluctantly, I agreed. Unbeknownst to the gentleman, although my repertoire was impressive, it had never ever included ironing, and I had previously avoided it at every opportunity. And I know you may well scoff, Brother Matthew, but I had never actually even plugged one in, or in fact...
No, I don't iron. I don't iron either, so I'm entirely with you, Mrs. Hughes.
Or in fact, I couldn't even unfold an ironing board for love or money.
Oh dear.
Says Mrs. Hughes. Anyway, I managed to work my way through the piles of ironing and things didn't seem to be going too badly. I even ironed a crease in his trousers as requested, so everything was going smoothly, if you'll pardon the pun. Except when it came to bed change day, and I was confronted with a king-size duvet, which is not only 100% cotton, it had more wrinkles than Nora Batty's stockings. It would take me forever. I looked at the duvet in despair. It was then that I had a brilliant idea. If I put the duvet cover on the duvet and then ironed it in situ, so to speak, that would save time and I wouldn't have to faff about trying to arrange a 7-foot square on a 6-inch wide ironing board. Anyway, I swiftly put the duvet cover on, turned up the iron to intense heat setting. This was one crease duvet, so heat was required and plenty of it. Once I completed ironing the duvet cover, I stood back to admire my handiwork. Ingenious. It had taken me half the time it would have done if I'd used the ironing board. Not bad for someone who can't stand ironing. Only losers use ironing boards, I realised. I just needed to adjust the fasteners at the end of the duvet, and then job done. Time to go home. Except when I tried to shake the duvet and the cover to separate them, they wouldn't budge. The duvet cover was completely welded to the duvet. They were, in fact, inseparable. The intense heat of the iron had melted the 100% microfiber of the expensive anti-allergenic duvet, and the cover was now an integral part of the duvet itself. I carefully tried to peel the duvet cover away from the duvet, but it took the outer microfiber layer with it, and all that was left of the duvet was the filling. All the microfiber covering was now etched to the inside of the king-size duvet cover, and the duvet cover was now so stiff it could stand up on its own. It only needed a pole in the middle, and it was an instant wigwam, or quizwam, or quizebo, whichever you fancy. I quickly broke the incredibly stiff duvet in half and managed to fold it as best I could, although it now looked less like a duvet cover and more like a folded piece of cardboard. I then hid the cardboard in the back of the linen cupboard, so it would be at least a couple of weeks before it was needed again. Just enough time for me to leave and never to be seen of again. Beads of perspiration were starting to develop at this point. I put the old unwashed duvet cover back on and left. Literally, I literally left. I left literally. Not only did I leave, I literally left, and I never came back.
Every sense.
In every sense, I was a goner. I did ring him and say that I had accepted a job in the Outer Hebrides and would be leaving very soon. I never went back in. I did hear that he moved shortly afterwards. Anyway, I seek forgiveness from everyone today, but particularly the gentleman for removing the fibre from his very expensive anti-allergenic quilt even, and for transforming his top-of-the-range duvet cover into essentially a wigwam. So that's a quizwam or a quizebo. Mrs. Hughes, lazy ironer, hopeless with the ironing board. What do you say, Sister Susie, in the pub?
Well, Mrs. Hughes, I also avoid ironing at all costs. I think if you hang it on a hanger in a warm place, then that basically gets all the wrinkles out. However, This was a job, so you were being paid for it. And for that, I'm sorry. I can't forgive it. You should have done it properly. So it is a not forgiven from me today.
I'm an ace ironer. I'm the only ironer amongst us. Anyway, so, but I'm just the reader. What do you say, Brother Matthew, in the Magic Attic?
Ironing. I mean, life is too short. It really is. Who is ironing duvet covers? I mean, they're going to get folded up anyway. What's the point? Ironing, we are going to look back on ironing like we look back on dishwashers. What's the point? Is it you've got water coming out of the taps and you've got a sink. You don't need a dishwasher. So I am going to forgive.
Yes.
Because there's no point in ironing. It's a waste of time.
Okay, so that's more about Matt's personal inadequacies than anything else. People's verdict, please. Do you forgive Mrs. Hughes? Yes or no? On the text, this is what you have to do. The people's verdict has come in on Mrs. Bridges ironing the duvet without taking the duvet out, just messing the whole thing up. Here's the people's verdict. What do they say, Brother Matthew?
So Julia in Ashfield says, I do agree with Susie that Mrs. Hughes should have fessed up. I bet Lord Grantham was most miffed when he found his ruined bedding. Not forgiven. Regarding ironing bedding, though, there are some of us out there. I've just finished ironing mine and I'm about to get in the bath with a book, which happens to be Simon's book, so that's nice. Dear Father Simon, not sure whether I forgive or not. Yeah, boom. More really agreeing with Matt, pointlessness of ironing, says Claire. As someone who once sent my mother a silk shirt in the post to iron when I was at university in 1992, different times, I'm pretty sure I'd have tried something similar to your listener. Louise in Newport Pagnell, I'm with Matt. Life is way too short to iron anything, let alone a duvet. Despite your misgivings and being way too qualified for this menial task, I'm totally gonna forgive you. Anonymous says, if only for the fact I'm gonna unforgive, if only for the fact that ironing is brilliant. How can Matt think ironing is a waste of time? Loads of people are saying this. And finally, Vicky in Northampton says, firstly, I iron almost everything. It's entirely necessary for a number of reasons, not least because it makes me look busy when I listen to you on the radio. Secondly, if Matt is banning the presence of a dishwasher in his home, I'm assuming it is him who attends to all the washing up duties. Yes, it is Vicky, actually. I do the washing up. I do not forgive on this occasion because even if Mrs. Non-Iron doesn't believe in ironing, her employer clearly did.
Can I just say, someone, 3 emails ago, who takes a silk shirt to university? Come on. That's a preposterous thing to do in the first place. Anyway, thanks for the verdicts. If you have a confession and we read it out, then you get a smart speaker. It's confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. If you have a confession, it's a very good thing to tell me about it. Otherwise, it ain't going to get on. And if we use it, then you get a smart speaker. Which is a very lovely thing. You send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Checking in that Brother Matthew is still ensconced in the attic.
I am standing by.
Robes.
Yes.
And his sandals and all that. And Sister Susie in the pub just checking in, making sure you're there and ready to pronounce.
Oh, yes.
Okay, here we go. Tonight's confession comes from Camille. Camille, merci bien. Dear Simon and the GHR Drive Time Clan. There you go, you've been rebranded. So I think that's
lovely.
I think that's quite good. The GHR Drive Time Clan. When listening to confessions, I often sit with an air of smugness about me as I felt I'd lived a life free from such events. However, this evening whilst driving home, I became overcome with shame as I suddenly recalled an event which happened when I was about 13 years old. I feel now is the time to repent. At the age of 12, I had been fortunate enough to go on a French exchange with my secondary school. Upon my return, I was obviously under the impression that I could now speak perfectly fluent French, and thus would often wander around muttering vague French phrases, marvelling at my awesome accent. Comme ci, comme ça. Eh bien,
Cherchez la femme.
Talk comme tu es bête. Mathias. Anyway, in the place where I lived, there was a church in the very centre of the market square called St Mary's Church. At the time of my story, it had been converted to a gift centre, a heritage centre, and a senior citizens' day centre. It was in this latter place where my mum worked, and I would often go and visit, helping out after school or in the school holidays. So, it is the school holidays, and I'm bored, and I'm on my way to see my mum. I decide to pretend to be French. Just,
right.
as you do. I'm saying
various
French phrases under my breath. Comme tu merci, revoir, eh bien, droite, gauche. Marveling at my incredible talent, I decide to be slightly more adventurous, and in what I feel is an appropriate French-sounding pidgin English, I approach a random lady in the street and say, excuse, please, I look for Saint-Marie Cherche. Can you help? And I tried to assume a pose of French person lost, whatever that looks like. The lady immediately springs to my aid. She asks me to repeat what I've said, which I do. My accent becomes a little stronger, perhaps with a hint of German in there, as I get a little carried away with my marvellous acting skills. I am looking for the Cherche Santa Marie. I enter my query with a rising intonation and a little shrug of my shoulders. Oh, you mean St. Mary's Church, says the smiling lady in a slow, loud and carefully enunciated manner. Oui, says I happily, thinking how fabulously I've managed to pull off being French. How easy is this? Let me show you where to go, says the lady, and she gesticulates forward. So I move off with her happily in the sure knowledge that she will go so far down the precinct to then point me in the direction of the church. So, says the lady whilst we walk, where do you come from? I speak a lot of different languages. Now, I begin to think that my French-speaking skills may not be as strong as I imagine them to be, so I tried to be vague. I come from a place, it's how you say, far away. It's very, very beautiful. My accent is now totally random, with intonation all over the place, a little bit of Russian, maybe some Estonian in there. I flap my hands in the direction of far, far away from here and try not to look too panicked. Your English is very good, says the lady kindly. Perhaps I speak your language. I do a lot of travelling myself. Do you come from a country in Europe? I might have visited it. Well, I am now, Father Simon, beginning to panic. A lot. My geographical knowledge is pants, and I can't think of any countries in Europe. Or, come to that, I can't think of any countries out of Europe. I can't even think of a country. We carry on walking to the church. Where are you meant to be, she asks. Are you meant to be meeting someone? We walk past the door of the day centre. The door opens. Someone steps outside. The lovely lady is between me and whoever has stepped out of the door. Oh, hello, says the lady, smiling warmly and turning towards whoever has stepped out. I was just coming to see you, but I'm just helping this young lady who's lost. She comes from another country, but I haven't established which one yet. The lady moves out of the way, and I'm stood looking directly at my mother. She looks at me and slightly raises her eyebrows. She then looks at the lady who is beaming from ear to ear, happy she's helped a person in distress. Lost, you say, queries my mother. The lady nods in agreement, looks from her to me. From another country, you say, asks Mum, and looks directly at me. The lady nods happily again. I try to look simultaneously lost, foreign, apologetic for the situation I have got myself into, and hopeful that Mum is not going to tell the lovely lady the truth of who I actually am. Just then some person calls to the lovely lady, and she looks towards them. Oh, she says, I've just got... could you help this young lady? She says to my mum, find where she needs to be. I'll be back in a bit. Yes, my mum says, and she turns to go back into the church with one arm directing me. I dutifully follow, feeling a right prune. Father Simon, I don't seek absolution from my mum because I'm sure this was just one of the many times she realised that one of her daughters was a right muppet at times. But I wish to say sorry to the lovely lady who helped me. She has probably spent the rest of her life trying to pin down the obscure, ever-changing accent that I used. I don't see the problem with that myself. Travelling the world, trying to locate its origins in her beautiful faraway place, which may or may not be in Europe. I hope that you, Simon, and the GHR Drive Time clan can look with compassion on my tale of shame. Well, let's just check in. It might be that Matt's sounding a little bit croaky there. See how the line is doing. Brother Matthew, what do you say to Camille and her wandering French accent?
I'll keep it brief.
Yeah, making absolutely no sense at all. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back to you. We're going to come back to you because we can't hear a single word you're saying. You could be speaking, in fact, in a foreign language. A little bit. You could be from over there, or maybe from somewhere else altogether. So, Sister Susie, it's down to you.
Well, I think I can do Matt as well if you want, but I'll do me. I think, Camille, it was excellent. well written, lovely tale, completely forgiven. And, Matt, of course he forgives. He forgives everything.
We're going to check it with Matt once we'll have to kind of reconnect the line or something like that. I think people's verdict, please, 61054. It's past 6. We're just celebrating the fact that we've got the line back to Brother Matthew because his magic attic was being a bit rubbish there. You need a Wi-Fi booster or something.
Oh, right, lovely. Thanks for that, yes.
So a while back we had tonight's confession, which came from Camille, who just wandered around town pretending to be French, and then found a woman who then helped her, and she ended up being embarrassed in front of her mother, and it was a very fine confession. Camille gets the smart speaker sent to her, but the people's verdict is like this with Brother Matthew.
Yeah, so Rich from Reading says a definite pardon for the confessor's full commitment to the cause, who amongst us hasn't pretended to be fluent in French and asked where the ruler is. Où est la règle? Rachel says Camille is completely and totally forgiven. I'd like to think that the lovely lady had a suspicion that she wasn't foreign, but played along with her. And as a mum of a boy who's done something very similar, there's extra forgiveness from me for her. Fab story. Maria says totally forgiven. My school friends and I did exactly the same thing to a poor, unsuspecting stranger once. We thought we were so convincing, but we must have looked like total muppets. I think Matt's robot Norman Collier impression was very impressive, though. And finally, Anonymous says completely forgiven, as my best friend and I, at the tender age of 15, also pretended to be French to attract members of the opposite sex by reciting Hail Marys in French, which my friend had learnt at her convent school. Hilarious and quite successful, I have to admit.
I say. So your confession, please, confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. If we use yours, and maybe if it had some accents in it, then that'll be great, so we can use the full range of our accents and knowledge of languages around the world. Confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. That's what we're after. Stand by for confessions then. If you'd like your confession read out, send it in. confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. And if you're ready with the people's verdict, 61054, you start your message with Simon. Let's just check in with Brother Matthew in the magic attic, making sure the lines are fine.
The line is fine.
Okay, Sister Susie live from the pub, just checking in. Are you paying close attention here?
I am paying very close attention.
Today's confession comes from Julie, who emails to say the following. Father Simon, the Caring Collective, names and location changed, obviously, to protect the not-so-innocent. In 1965, my husband, Peter, was... Actually, so this is a confession not from Julie. It's on behalf of husband Peter.
Oh, here we go.
In 65, was a 9-year-old boy living with his parents and 2 older brothers somewhere in the north of England. As was normal, he would return from school, change out of his school uniform, have a snack provided by his long-suffering mum, Dora, and then hurry out to play and cause mayhem with his buddies. On this particular day, he dawdled over his snack as his pal Roger had a dentist appointment and would be playing late. Dora had provided Peter with a glass of squash and an orange-flavoured club biscuit. Ah... Now, the orange-flavoured club biscuit might remind you of this.
If you like a lot of chocolate on your biscuit, join our...
What? Club. Join a club. There you go, that's the thing. So basically anyone who was anybody was eating club biscuits back in 1965. After eating said biscuit, Peter decided to try to rebuild the packaging to leave on the table to outwit one of his older brothers. I did exactly the same.
Yeah, we've all done that.
He soon realised it lacked weight to appear more realistic, so looked around the room for ballast. On the nearby sideboard, he noticed his mother's wedding and engagement rings that she often removed when doing the household chores, because this is the 60s. They were perfect, just the right weight to hold the newly folded foil and paper sleeve in place. What could go wrong? It's at this point that Roger turned up, having returned early from the dentist. They skipped out to play, leaving the wrapper on the table. Sometime later the following day, Peter became aware of a commotion and raised voices. Upon sneaking downstairs to listen, he had a panic attack when he heard what had caused the disturbance. His mother, Dora, was telling his father and 2 brothers about her missing rings, which had vanished from the sideboard where everyone knew she always kept them. She had searched high and low to no avail. This would have been the perfect opportunity for Peter to confess, and then maybe a search of the kitchen bin would have possibly revealed the jewellery. Dora was and still is exceptionally house-proud. However, being the weekend and therefore no school, Peter raced off out of the back door to escape and find his mates. Thinking things would calm down and return to normal, Peter stayed out for most of the day, having pushed the incident to the back of his mind. Now, at this point, I should mention that, as was normal at the time, some families took in a lodger to supplement their income. Peter's parents had taken in a young man called Norman. He was a quiet young man who kept himself to himself and hadn't been with them for long. Upon returning home for his tea, the chaos of the morning wiped from his mind. Peter was shocked at the scene that confronted him. Norman was being evicted from the house by his parents, with his mother Dora shouting and pointing that she'd never really trusted him before, didn't like the look of him, but had never expected him to steal from them. Well, Peter knew what he had to do. He ran and hid in his bedroom.
Of course.
Feeling very sick and guilty, but he ran and hid in his bedroom. After years of guilt and never being able to eat or look at an Orange Club biscuit ever again. Yes, because remember...
If you like a lot of chocolate on your biscuit, join up.
Well, it's not Dora's forgiveness that Peter craves, as she and her rings were replaced with far more superior ones, which she chose herself and much preferred. It is poor Norman the lodger, who must have been so confused. He did, however, find other lodgings, and as my parents had no evidence of wrongdoing, they dropped the matter. Father Simon and the Caring Collective, I seek your forgiveness on behalf of my husband. He's led an honest, caring life ever since. However, you have to say it's a fairly shocking story. Norman evicted, accused of stealing the rings, and he was completely innocent. Sister Susie.
Well, I'm not going to forgive Peter because I think that's terrible. Even though he was young and he was a child, he should have stepped up and, admitted what he'd done, because they would have forgiven him. It would have been fine. But the main reason I'm not forgiving Peter is because his wife Julie has had to confess on his behalf.
True.
It's not even from him. Not good enough.
Brother Matthew in the attic.
Well, you're right. I mean, it is shocking, and you would have to have the morals of a sewer rat to forgive Peter. I happily will stand up to that challenge and forgive him, because it was the 60s. Everything was going on then, and the rings probably turned up. Norman, I'm sure, found somewhere good to stay after that. We don't know, but I'm gonna forgive, because it probably all worked out for the end.
People's verdict 61054. You start your message with Simon. Meantime, the people's verdict is in on tonight's confession from Julie. Husband, what was her name? Was it Pete? I think it was, yeah.
Yes, Peter, yeah.
Who basically framed the lodger, Norman, who got evicted. They accused him of stealing, and it wasn't him. What does the nation say, Brother Matthew?
The nation's pretty united in saying not forgiven. Di says that poor Norman in his new lodging, every time the landlady said, "Have you seen he probably ran to his room and started packing." Anne in Gloucester, not forgiven. When I was around Peter's age, my mum accused me of stealing her wedding ring. It turned up in her glove. Awful. Appalling behaviour, says Miss D of Liverpool. I was raised in the 60s. I'd never have touched the rings, let alone allowed an innocent party to be blamed. Disgraceful. Unforgiven. Kim in Kings Norton, I listened in horror-filled amusement. The horror won. However, James W. in Runcorn clearly has the same moral code as me. Totally amazing confession. How can I not forgive?
Okay, thank you very much for those. And if you have a confession, it's confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk.